What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, November 19th, 2018. Start of a brand new week, start of Thanksgiving week. And obviously that's going to be happening on Thursday toward the end of the week. And, it's really interesting to just basically reveal the mindset of how our nation is working. There was an article that came out from Zero Hedge where apparently there is concern of a cold wave coming down out of Canada over much of the eastern United States, and how it will devastate the Black Friday sales, that people won't want to go out on those snowy and icy roads and, brave the cold to just, get down to their favorite retail place of worship. And again, it's one of the things I don't like about holidays in America. They really are just more about marketing and sales and all the rest of it. Claire and I, of course, we're staying home. We're going to be, sharing the holiday with family over the internet. All right, let's talk about politics. It looks like this debacle in Florida is finally winding down. Senator Bill Nelson finally conceded the Senate race to Florida Governor Rick Scott yesterday, nearly 2 weeks after the midterm election and following two contentious recounts here. Andrew Gillum has conceded to Ron DeSantis in the Florida's governor's race. So those are pretty much over here. Meanwhile, Brenda Snipes has tendered her resignation, and she offered a resignation yesterday, even as more votes were surfacing in Florida. It was a horribly botched up job, no question about it. And of course, the New York Times is saying it's a flawed process. No, it wasn't flawed. They were trying to cheat and they got caught at it here. So she's now out, and they're probably looking for another cheater to put on in. Meanwhile, over in Georgia, Stacey Abrams has basically effectively quit all political activity without conceding defeat. In fact, she's taking the attitude that she was robbed by Kemp, that Brian Kemp, when those gosh darn Republicans, they're stealing elections, and that's our gig. They're cutting in on our action here. So now we're seeing all of these Democratic actors out in Hollywood are threatening to boycott Georgia. And the reason that might be significant is that Georgia, through generous tax incentives, has attracted a lot of film work. And a lot of production is done in Georgia. I remember when I was still in the industry, getting contacted, by a film commission representative from Georgia at one of the big conventions, handing out these little pins, which I think I still have. So, but these Hollywood actors are saying, we will not work on any movie or TV shows in Georgia because, by golly, we wanted you to vote our person in here. And I think probably people are getting a little bit angry at these pretentious celebrities. Yes, they're well known and they're actors and models, but that's what they are, actors and models. And I think the American people are perhaps seeing them as being a little too big for their britches. I think is a good way to describe that. In coming on out and trying to say, well, we're celebrities. We're big stars on TV, and we should be running the country. I don't think so. Now, up in Washington, D.C., 3 Democratic senators have filed a lawsuit challenging the appointment of Matthew Whitaker as acting attorney general. And the complaint was filed earlier today by Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, Hawaii's own Mazie Hirono, the man up and shut up lady, and Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. And it's arguing that the appointment of Whitaker violates the Constitution because he has not been confirmed by the Senate. Well, Trump has to make the appointment before he can be confirmed. Now, what they're trying to argue is that Trump should have promoted the Assistant Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, when Sessions left. But that would have made the ejecting of Sessions rather pointless, because you're getting rid of one cover-up artist, political hack, and replacing him with another one. And I'm sure that behind Rosenstein there's a whole line of these career Justice Department employees who've already been vetted to be reliable and of service to the deep state. But in point of fact, the law does allow the president to bring in, shall we say, new blood. And I think the lawsuit is just more lawfare, and it's frivolous, and I don't think they're going to go anywhere with it. Now, it's very obvious that when Trump tries to get the Senate to confirm Whitaker, there's going to be a fight. There's going to be a fight. They don't want him there. They don't want somebody in the Attorney General's job who might actually decide to do the job. That could be a disaster. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. And so, yeah, they're in a tizzy over that whole situation. They only want their pre-approved deep state loyal people in power here. Trump's got another 2 years to impress the American people that he meant what he said when he talked about draining the swamp, and he needs to start now. And there is a rumor that as many as 5 cabinet positions may get replaced in the coming weeks. So that would be good to see. Now that the midterms are over, Trump's got a little more latitude to do things here. Apparently, a new complaint has been filed against Maxine Waters, and this new unfolding scandal has the potential to basically end her career. Not only end her career, she could be looking at jail time. And the complaint involves an obscure fundraising tactic that has raked in thousands of dollars from state politicians in exchange for being listed on her slate mailers. Now, this go-around, it involves supporters of a former Los Angeles mayor defeated in the June gubernatorial primary. So this watchdog group named the National Legal and Policy Center is the one who's filed the complaint with the Federal Election Commission against Waters, her campaign, and a pro-charter school group called Families and Teachers for Antonio Villaraigosa, who backed the former Democratic mayor of Los Angeles. This is a very serious charge. It was basically pay for play is what it came on down to. Now, Maxine Waters has the best attorneys that money can buy, and it looks like she may need them here. Meanwhile, over at CNN, contributor Kirsten Powers declared on air last Friday that all white females who supported President Donald Trump were racist. And Powers is out there saying, well, look, I'm not racist. I didn't like Hillary Clinton. And Kirsten rather is saying, no, that's not, you're just being racist. That's it. You know, that you've aligned yourself against the oppressed people. So they're really pushing on this idea that white people by default are oppressors and everybody else is a victim. We're heading into Zimbabwe territory here. Also over at CNN, apparently the White House is now going to revoke Jim Acosta's credentials again. This time they're going to go through the formal process so that the courts can't say you have to reinstate him. And again, Trump's the boss. That's his place of employment. And the presser there is a courtesy. I don't know why he doesn't have more of the independent media. We carried a lot of water for him back in 2016. But be that as it may, he's under no obligation to have any individual journalists come there, especially one who behaves in a very obnoxious, confrontational manner here. But apparently CNN is out there saying, we demand an emergency briefing. You know, you will consult with us before you kick our reporter out. Actually, CNN, I think, is getting an overinflated sense of their own importance, especially given their ratings of late. Now, out in California, Michael Avenatti, the porn lawyer, the one who was trying to help bring down Brett Kavanaugh and just create a name for himself in the media, has had his law firm evicted from its California offices for missing 4 months of rent. And basically, the landlord took him to court. It was a 1-hour trial. Avenatti did not even attend. So the Orange County Sheriff's Office posted an eviction notice on the law firm's offices, ordering Avenatti to vacate the building by 6 a.m. On, I don't have the date there, but he's basically getting kicked out of his building. So, beginning of the end. And after that domestic abuse story, all of his newfound Democratic friends, they're starting to just basically drift away. They're starting to drift away. Okay. Now, do you remember a while back, Bill and Hillary Clinton decided they were going to have their nationwide tour, the one-of-a-kind conversation with two individuals who helped shape the world. It was an evening with the Clintons, and people were saying, you know, the tickets were like $700 for the front seats. And a lot of people were saying this may be Hillary trying to sort of get a measure of popular support going into 2020. Well, apparently, the tour is suffering from very, very poor sales. People just aren't going. They don't want to see them. Very, very few people are going, and there is a persistent rumor coming out of the American Mirror that the rest of the tour may be canceled. So, Hillary, take a cue. The United States is kind of, you've had your time in the sun. You've had your 15 minutes of fame. Okay, now let's get into the conflict zones. By the way, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Talking about what's going on in Afghanistan, Rand Paul has come on out criticizing Trump's foreign policy, especially the amount of money being spent to build roads and bridges in Afghanistan. And apparently it's something like $50 billion with a B being spent in Afghanistan building roads and bridges. And he's saying, why aren't we building roads and bridges here? We need them here. And apparently a study from Brown University released last Wednesday found that American taxpayers spent $5.9 trillion with a T in military actions against Afghanistan, Iraq, and Pakistan since 2001, which is $2 trillion more than all federal government spending during the 2017-2018 fiscal year. Just vast sums of money. And this Brown University study was only Afghanistan, Iraq, and Pakistan. It doesn't have the numbers for Syria or for Libya or for, well, every place else that we're at right now, because officially we have conflicts going on in 7 countries. And if Bernie Sanders is right, we're in have military presence in something like 70. Huge, vast sums of money. And nothing left over for the American people or the American nation here. Now, interestingly enough, the U.S. Special Envoy to Afghanistan has said he hopes to strike a final peace deal with the Taliban by April of next year. I guess after, 17 years in Afghanistan, everybody is tired of this. They want it to stop. What the Taliban is going to ask for is very simple. U.S. go home. Now, what our special envoy, Zalmay Khalilzad, is going to try and figure out is some way to keep the puppet government in power. So we'll see what actually happens over there. All right, getting on down to Syria. It looks like the deconfliction zone idea is not working on out here. Apparently, back on the 17th, the Syrian Arab Army and its allies regained control of Al-Safa after the collapse of the ISIS defense in the area. And a Syrian Arab Army source told South Front that heavy rain had destroyed most of the fortifications and hideouts of the terrorist group during the last few days. One of the problems when you're having to work with sand in the desert. It doesn't rain very often, but when it does, everything just gets washed away here. So the remaining terrorists fled toward the eastern Homs Desert. The state agency SANA confirmed the Syrian Arab Army had made significant gains and that the highest positions in the area are under army control. They've got the high ground. They've got the initiative, okay? Now, the United Nations recently released a report confirming that many of the places in Syria where the terror group ISIS continues to operate, recuperate, and extract oil for profit are in areas of the country occupied by the United States. In other words, the United States is providing safe haven to this terrorist group, and the United Nations is calling them on it. Over in eastern Syria, U.S. airstrikes have killed at least 40 people, most of them civilians. This happened Saturday, and human rights observers reported he killed 40 more people, overwhelmingly civilians, mostly women and children. Over in the southeast Idlib, a major Syrian army assault has begun. The Sochi deal is clearly unraveling. And a lot of people are saying for a while it looked like Syria was going to devolve into a Cold War of everybody just staring at each other, making faces at each other. But it looks like it's going to become hot again over the next few months. Now, adding complexity to the situation, Russia's submarine killers are now on patrol off the shores of Syria. And the Russian Navy basically is in a position to be in control of that part of the Mediterranean. Now, my guess would be that the Russians have either located or are working to locate that Arsenal ship, that converted SSBN that carries all those Tomahawk cruise missiles. They're going to be keeping an eye on that one, because if the shooting starts again, they're going to want to basically shut that ship down. Okay, over in Yemen, 1 in 3 U.S. drone strike deaths are civilians, again, including children. And these are U.S. drones. One farmer said, "We live in fear. Drones don't leave the sky. They're just constantly up there." I mean, they have to leave eventually for fuel, but they're designed to stay on station for a very, very long time. It's like having the sword of Damocles dangling over your head. Now, Yemen's Houthi leader is extending the olive branch and offering a ceasefire if the Saudis will agree. Now, at the moment, it looks like, and again, maybe it's because of the optics or something else, it looks like everybody wants to cool this thing down. The Saudis have basically stopped trying to control the port at Hodeidah. The UN is still trying to get humanitarian assistance in through there. But basically, Mohammed Ali al-Houthi, head of the Supreme Revolutionary Council, said, "We are willing to freeze and stop military operations on all fronts to reach a just and honorable peace if they really want peace for the Yemeni people," which sounds really good, and it's a good idea. But there's more to that Yemen conflict. Remember, this all began with the people of Yemen wanting to kick out an imposed puppet government put in by the United States several years ago. So it's not likely that they're going to be comfortable accepting a new replacement, brighter, shinier foreign puppet government either. Or it may just be that everybody's tired of the death and destruction. We got to take a break for commercials here, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And being that this is Thanksgiving week, it's time to think, what are we thankful for? I'm obviously thankful for Claire being in my life. She's thankful I'm in her life. I am presuming that all of you listeners are thankful for having Republic Broadcasting here to try and keep you informed when there are so many forces out there trying to keep you befuddled and bedazzled and distracted. So this might be a good week to kind of show your thankfulness because Republic Broadcasting could use some help. So the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit card or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during normal business hours, extension 3 at all other times. So the network thanks you. All righty, let's getting back to the international news here. The Saudi king, King Salman, not the crown prince, the actual king, is urging action against Iran. At the same time, he's backing the idea of peace in Yemen. All right, so this may be what's going on. Everyone wants to whoop on Iran, but Saudi Arabia is expending a lot of their energy and resources over Yemen. And maybe somebody made the decision they really can't handle two wars at once. So they're going to gracefully exit from Yemen, put it on a back burner, and then gin up some reason to go into Iran. And I think they're out there accusing Iran of being in violation of the Chemical Weapons Convention. So it's going to be something about Iran has chemical weapons to go with their nuclear weapons and whatever other lies are going to be here. Now, Senator Lindsey Graham was on an interview yesterday, and he described Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman as irrational and unhinged, and says he's weakened the ties between Washington and Riyadh. So I think I've called it correctly. Washington is finding Crown Prince Mohammed a little less than perfectly obedient, and there's a campaign now to basically drive him from power and get somebody more amenable in there. But so Graham went on to say, I think he's done a lot of damage to the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia, and I have no intention of working with him ever again. Yeah, they're telegraphing pretty hard. Mohammed must go here. Meanwhile, over in Turkey, one of their hardline newspapers basically came on out and said that if Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman remains in power, war will break out. That's pretty serious stuff. So, World War I began officially with the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. Is World War III going to get cranked up with the assassination of Khashoggi? Because they're certainly making an icon out of him. And when you consider how many other journalists have been killed this year that scarcely got any mention in the media, there's obviously an agenda. There's obviously an agenda. Meanwhile, of course, the United States, which doesn't want to harm its relationship with Saudi Arabia, has issued sanctions against selected Saudi individuals who are suspected of being involved with the murder of Khashoggi. But they did not sanction the Crown Prince. They're going along with Saudi Arabia's version of the story that the Crown Prince knew nothing about it, even as America's corporate media is trumpeting this claim by the Central Intelligence Agency that he actually gave the order. So somebody's playing politics here. And this CIA story, it may be to put pressure on Khashoggi. It may be to put pressure on Jared Kushner. It may be an attempt to put pressure on Donald Trump himself. So, over in Iran, one of their senior commanders says the country's naval fleet will continue its presence in the high seas to protect Iran's national interests. And he's saying, basically saying, as long as the presence of the Iranian army's fleets That must be a mistranslation. To secure Iran's interests, the dispatch of the fleets to the high seas will continue. And Iran does have a strong navy, not as strong as the United States, but apparently in good working order. And this commander said that if necessary, they will send their ships into the Atlantic Ocean. And they have done it in the past. Meanwhile, Finland is out there screaming that Russia was jamming GPS during the recent NATO drills. They have no evidence for it whatsoever, but by golly, it's just anything that goes wrong, we blame Russia. You know, Skripals get food poisoning. Oh, it's Russian poisoning attack here. Our GPS equipment isn't working all that good. Oh, it's got to be Russia's fault. We're going to take a break for commercials. We got a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right to the phones to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Norway tried to blame Russia for their frigate hitting the oil tanker. So,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, Operation, was it Trident Junk?
Yes.
It makes a good barrier reef now because that thing's gone. If you saw the latest.
It sank all the way down. They're not going to be able to get it up. I imagine they'll scrap it in place and, you know, recover as much of it as they can.
It's all Fat Leonard's fault. Oh, wait. That's the United States, not Norway.
That's the other side of the world.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, you know, I got to talk to you about, you know, with the things going on with not working out in Idlib, but did you see they completed the offshore part of Turk Stream?
Yes.
There was a press conference, yeah, and it's going to be completed in 2019. And I think the power of Siberia that goes to China is either completed in December this year or early next year.
Yep.
So you got two projects, plus they're working on Nord Stream, 2? So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff
they're trying to get
on.
going on Nord Stream 2. They're, you know, but there's a lot of political opposition to that one.
But Germany needs that.
Yes.
I don't see them backing down from that because, remember, most German manufacturers, they rely on, like, that, you know, on natural gas. You know, so, like, but, hey, Mike, but as all that's going on, we have, as the reality TV show world turns again over here. You know, I mean, it just doesn't end. You know, as I feel sorry for Avenatti and stuff, but that's just sideshow crap.
I don't feel sorry for him. You know, he basically messed up. You know, and he let the brief moment of fame that he had go to his head, and he made a whole series of really bad decisions.
It's just a shame. Like, I mean, we're coming to the holiday, and if you look in the stock market again today, things are not going well.
No.
I mean, it's just everything, you know, you look at what's going on with Israel, Netanyahu's in trouble, Saudi Arabia, with the Khashoggi murder is in trouble, and just, it seems like the pillars are falling apart for, like, not the deep, well, I guess the deep state, but, like, you know, this oligarchy we got, and it's not going good for Theresa May in Britain either, so, and Macron either, because they have riots going on over in France and Britain, because France had a 20% increase in fuel prices. So that, you know, there's a lot going on. But that's all I had to say, Mike. You know, everybody, you know, keep an eye out. A lot of crazy stuff coming. Thanks, Mike.
There certainly is, and I think what's going on is we're sort of used to seeing the world or having the world presented to us as operating more or less smoothly, because that's the job of the media. And growing up, you know, all we ever got was the government and corporate media's view of things. And as more and more people disconnect from the corporate media and the government and start looking around, they're beginning to realize that the world is very, very different from what they imagined it was, emphasis on the word imagine, and it can be very disconcerting. And I think that's really what's affecting a lot of people. It's like thinking you live in this wonderful neighborhood, and all of a sudden you finally get to open the door and see what's outside there, and it's not very pretty. So I think a lot of people are going through kind of a sense of emotional displacement, because when you talk about your identity, your sense of self, a large part of that is where you live, or where you think you live, or the society in which you think you live. And when you find out that doesn't exist, it can literally leave you kind of feeling a little lost. An identity crisis, if you will. Okay, so the phone lines are open again. And getting on back to the news here. And I hate to say I told you so. No, actually, I really rather enjoyed, especially in this particular case here, because Russia is now reopening the Soviet-era military bases they have on Cuba. And we knew this was going to happen, and this is why reversing Obama's normalization of relations with Cuba was a big, huge strategic mistake. And obviously, you know, as Trump pulled out of the INF treaty, and everybody's talking about, oh, we get to build nuclear weapons again, Russia's going to be there on Cuba. They're going to have listening stations there. They're going to be able to monitor what the U.S. is doing in the Caribbean. And you know how the CIA loves to play around in the Caribbean. This is a major step backward. And again, when they started reversing the normalization of relations with Cuba, I mean, for a while, it really looked like that whole ugly chapter of history was going to be over, going back to the Bay of Pigs. There were actually cruise ships going to Cuba briefly. They were talking about lifting the embargo. There was going to be Cuban rum and Cuban cigars in our bottle shops, various other things like that. The Cubans were going to be able to buy newer cars. All that's gone. And what that rehardening of relations with Cuba has done is handed Cuba to Russia on a silver platter. Good thinking there, people. Good thinking. Over in Israel, Netanyahu is basically trying to hold together what's left of his ruling coalition and saying that calling snap elections now would be irresponsible. Because now he is not only the prime minister, he's the minister of defense, and the security of Israel has to take priority over political considerations here. He's basically trying to duck the fact that his star is clearly on the wane. People don't like him. And he's been there for a very, very, very long time here. Now, here is where we get a little bit of arrogance on display here. Palestine, which has been recognized as a state by the United Nations General Assembly, is joining various international organizations. For example, President Mahmoud Abbas signed the documents last Thursday to join the Universal Postal Union. This is a United Nations agency that coordinates international postage and 10 international protocols and conventions. And the move infuriated the United States, saying that this is premature and it's counterproductive. How dare you act like you're a real country? Israel says you're not, and we say you're not. We don't care what the United Nations says. And again, if you look at the way these things are supposed to work, yeah, people have a right to self-determination. You get enough people together and say, we're going to be our own little country. And if you're recognized as a country by much of the rest of the world, then you are a country. And the U.S. and Israel can throw tantrums all they want and hurl more sanctions, which no doubt is going to happen. Israel's trying to find a way to just make Palestine go away forever. Meanwhile, up in Europe, the EU President Jean-Claude Juncker was photographed recently in mismatched shoes, not just the socks, the shoes. And it's rumored that he's a heavy drinker. And this is the guy who wants to lead a new unified European Union army. Now, there is a chilling thought indeed. Story coming on out from over at shtfplan.com, and I'm not really surprised. But apparently Kim Jong-un is showing every indication of keeping North Korea's nuclear weapons, despite promises that he would begin denuclearization. So, bad Kim Jong-un, bad Kim Jong-un. Well, it's not really entirely his fault. Sources inside North Korea have reportedly revealed that Kim Jong-un has no plans to surrender his nuclear weapons despite talks of denuclearization with Trump. Kim has been assuring his citizens he won't allow North Korea to be vulnerable, which is a very wise thing to do. So Kim is in a very, very tight place. He knows that if he gives up the nuclear weapons, it could only be a matter of time before North Korea gets invaded. Because that's what the United States has been doing to all these other countries. Oh, give up your weapons of mass destruction. We promise there'll be peace. Followed by an attack. They did it in Iraq. They did it in Syria. It's a repeating pattern. They're trying to do it in Iran. And of course, there is that other issue of the difference in the negotiating styles, where Kim Jong-un has made several gestures of going along with the original deal with Trump, shutting down the nuclear test site, dismantling rocket test stands, returning the bodies of U.S. soldiers who died when that Korean War started, allowing people from the North and South to basically meet again after all these years. They're tearing down the guard post on the DMZ. They're talking about opening up the bridges and rail lines. Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in are talking reunification. They've effectively ended the nuts and bolts of the Korean War. And you have the United States throwing a tantrum saying, no, 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 we will decide when the Korean War is over. It's our war. We paid for it. We get to decide when it gets turned off. But I think the two Koreas have already decided, yeah, it's effectively over. It was just flat out silly to have a ceasefire go on that long and not just say, we can't even really remember why we were shooting each other in the first place. I know it's in the history books, but let's just keep on talking about reunification here, which the U.S. definitely does not want. All right, so let's talk about some economic news. The Federal Reserve, you need to remember, it is an autonomous entity. It does not answer to any government oversight. We've got Alan Greenspan on video saying, the Federal Reserve answers to no government authority. It never has. It probably never will. And again, the Federal Reserve, it's a privately owned central bank. It has extraordinary authorities to coin and create our money. Well, it doesn't even use coins and metal of value anymore. It's just ink, paper, and numbers in a computer. But the problem is now they're trying to basically raise their rates to maximize the interest payments coming in on the debt. It is having a negative effect on the stock market. It was a bad, bad day on the American stock market. But if this article that's over at shtfplan.com is correct, the Fed is going to continue on the course, even though there are a lot of voices right now saying you have to back off. You have to back off the rate increases. You have to back off the tightening. So the question is going to be, will the Federal Reserve be thinking in terms of the general good of the country or just lying in their own pockets? And I tend to favor probably the last. Another article along the same line, this one from Investment Watch blog. The good times for the markets are over. The bad times are about to hit. And again, let's see. The Dow ended down 395, S&P 500 down 45, NASDAQ down 219. That's a bad day on the stock market. And I can imagine a lot of investors are getting very, very jitterish indeed. And I think Well, first of all, they're going to tell us it's going to be a great holiday shopping season, and the stuff is already in the stores. The Christmas stuff is already out there in the stores. But there are like 8 retailers who are hovering on the edge of collapse, and if they don't have a wonderful holiday shopping season, we're going to see doors starting to close first part of next year after the January white sales. And it all comes down to a very simple fact. Ordinary people, working class people, even middle class people, we don't have money anymore. It's all been sucked out of our society by the money junkies and by the war machine, by outsourcing our jobs to other countries, by automation, and it was very short-sighted. But then addicts never think very clearly, and that's what we're dealing with, money addicts. But if ordinary Americans are not able to trade their labor for decent wages and salaries, then they may walk into those malls and look around and daydream. They may not be buying anything. It's always a really good exercise. If you have to go down to the mall, and by the way, I wouldn't bother on Black Friday. The idea of people clubbing each other to death to get an item they think has been discounted. It's a poor portrait of the American people. But when you're down at the mall anyway, and you're walking around, you'll probably see a lot of people. Don't count the people. Count how many shopping bags you see. Because Claire and I have noticed when we go down to the mall at the bottom of the hill here, there'll be a lot of people looking around. Very few of them are actually carrying any packages. Most of them, they just have empty hands. Alrighty, getting on back to the international situation. Russia is talking about possibly settling their accounts with Iran in their national currencies in order to continue their bilateral cooperation despite the U.S. sanctions against Iran. And as I keep saying, the global economy, with all of this abuse of sanctions and tariffs and the rest of it, the global economy is going to reorder itself to exclude the United States. It's going to be all this global commerce going on. There's going to be a big hole in the middle where the United States used to be. China just dumped another huge load of U.S. treasuries again. Probably getting a little annoyed at that trade war. We're coming up here on another commercial break. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we will be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And this story I'm about to tell you, we have heard of this sort of thing happening before, but it just boggles the mind how bureaucrats can be like this. Okay, apparently over in Kansas City, there was a group of volunteers who got together to cook food for the homeless and hungry. And apparently city health inspectors showed up, confiscated the freshly made food, poured bleach all over it to make sure nobody would eat it, and then basically threw it in the dumpsters. And apparently the health department seemed very surprised that there was a backlash. And they said, well, look, we can't guarantee the health and safety of this food for these homeless people. We're just looking out for their welfare here. Well, I got a news flash for you. I think these people are better off with these volunteer cooked meals than just eating what's in the trash dumpster. Ever stop and realize that it's a question of different degrees here? These people are homeless. They are hungry. They need to be fed. The government is doing nothing about it because all of the extra money is going to buy bullets and bombs and bandages. And this health department tried to make it sound like this was a good deed, to not let these homeless people risk listeria, salmonella, or E. coli. He said, we saved these people from going to the emergency room, which of course was an insult to all those volunteers who were out there cooking. And it's absurd. Bureaucrats, it's like if you go to work for the government, they do a lobotomy on you. People stop thinking here. There is a new phenomenon across the landscape of America, and that are homeless families who are living out of recreational vehicles. They've lost their main house, but their camper vans, their motorhomes were paid off, so they're able to still live in those. The problem is, of course, where to park them. Some communities are taking a look at this and saying, okay, we need to set up dedicated RV parking spaces, so these will not be on the road, that will include things like plumbing hookups and water availability. Other communities are going the different direction, and they're simply writing tickets on these RVs until the fines build up to the point where the RVs can be confiscated, which is a rather heartless thing. But this is supposed to be the American dream? I don't think so here. U.S. household debt hits a record $13.5 trillion with a T dollars. Delinquencies on mortgages have hit a 6-year high. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification, and we will be right back with Hour 2. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about the economic news. And apparently America's largest bridal chain, David's, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And apparently they missed a debt payment last October on $270 million in unsecured notes. And so David's Bridal has begun a pre-packaged financial restructuring by initiating a voluntary Chapter 11 bankruptcy reorganization. Now, the company will remain in operation during the restructuring, which will cut outstanding debt by more than $400 million out of its overall debt load of $760 million. That's a lot of debt load. But we're raised to think that that's a good thing. Oh, yeah, got to be in debt. Got to be in debt to the bankers. Can't do business without being in debt. Here's where I have a problem. We know that fewer and fewer people are getting married these days. And that has to be taken into calculation, I think. Anyway, as Dustin was mentioning, over in France, they are having major riots over French fuel prices. They shot up about 20%, and the French people are just fed up. And so they've got 280,000 people protesting the rising fuel prices. One person is dead, 200 have been injured. And it seems to be a flashpoint because I think the French are just fed up with all of the scandals, poor policy choices. And populations can be like that, where they're holding it in, they're angry about this, they're angry about that, they're angry about the poor roads, they're angry about the rails, and they're holding it. Then all of a sudden, something is going to happen that puts it over the threshold. And the media may say, oh, well, this rioting is all about fuel prices. No, it's about everything cumulatively those people have had to deal with. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now from Mark in Los Angeles. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, thanks for talking to me, man. Thanks for having me back. I told you I'd come back.
Okay.
Real quick, I have a suggestion for a bill or a law that any rational person would not find so far-fetched, but the hypocrites would totally find this to be offensive, and they would compare this to the your previous callers that talked about, you know, executions and guillotines and everything else. But I'm not talking about that. You know, what's going on? You know, I'm LA resident, man, and what's going on? It's almost like these when you watch court TV and you see these irresponsible pit bull owners. You know, these people that walk around and they say, oh, our dog wouldn't hurt a fly, and he's off leash. And then they tell the passerbyers, don't be scared of him, and he won't bother you. You know, and that's that. It's like it shouldn't be up to us to have to exercise fear or bravery or anything when you should just leash your dang dog. You know, it's like irresponsible parents who let their kids just run amok, and that's what we're letting the hypocrites. So that's what I call them. That's what we're letting them do, man. They're just running amok. Anyway, one of the laws I think should happen. You know, because I'm kind of on the fence with the immigration thing, because I have some friends who did not come here legally, and I love them. I watch them. They're productive. They're doing what they're not part of, they might not be the mainstream trying to go the right avenue of citizenship, but they're working and they're not dealing drugs. They're not, to people that I've just known and befriended, and I love them. You know, like I said, I live in LA. But anyway, if you want to vote for immigration, if you want to vote for open borders, you want to vote anything like that, you should accept responsibility for that. And I feel like for every registered hypocrite who wants to say, yeah, open borders are cool, then you should sponsor 10, what I'll say, illegals. I mean, you don't have to meet them and pay for them, but 10 names of people that cross that border are responsible to one voter. Therefore, if that person gets into a drunk driving accident or robs a store or does anything, then there is an American Democrat voter that has to answer for that. And I feel like if you're in any position of an electoral position, like whether it be a school board member, a council member, a mayor, or a governor, then you should have to be responsible for 50 immigrants. Therefore, if one of them commits a murder or something like that, you have to answer to it. You know, and you have to pay for it. That would never ever hold up in court.
That would never hold up in court.
Never.
No.
Never. Of course it would. But it to me, it feels there's so many things wrong other than what I think you call it Title VIII.
Yes.
Other than that, I feel like it's extreme taxation without representation. You know, because you don't want to pay taxes for that. I don't want to pay taxes for that. But these, the Nancy Pelosi's and the Maxine Waters, I truly think those people are doing intravenous clam chowder. And no disrespect, I thought you'd like that. No disrespect.
We're going to get nasty letters from the clams now.
Well, hey, you know what? I'll take responsibility and absolve GCN of all of that.
This is RBN.
Thank you, Mike.
So hang up and call the other network.
I have a ton of laws. Huh?
I said maybe you should hang up and call the other network. I'm just joking with you. Anyway, listen. Let's get back here.
Please don't fire me, Mike, because I need you.
The problem is that we can postulate all the laws that we want. We've already got a bunch of laws. The problem is they are not being enforced because of politics, because the government itself,
absolutely,
the Democrats just want to go their own way. They've got an agenda that they're trying to push down our throats, and we have a Republican establishment which basically doesn't really see it as that big of a problem that the laws are not being enforced. And that's all it would really take.
Yes, Mike. Real quick, too. Thank you so much, man. I'm one of those people who I am upset with Trump. I'm not happy at all with Trump, but I feel like I have a right to be unhappy with him because I feel like he's thrown his supporters, especially the alternative media, under the bus, because I feel like the alternative media and his fact of him being an outsider and all of that is what gained my trust. And every time that the media pounced on him, I wanted to defend him. And I'm still totally grateful for him. I mean, I'm pissed. I feel like he has a lot to answer for, and he never will. But if nothing else, when he won that election, man, it was like I felt like finally somebody heard me. And other than what you call the snowflakes,
yes,
for me personally, I felt like I got to give the middle finger to the old establishment GOPers who did everything they could to get in the way of Ron Paul.
Yes.
In the last, that last fiasco at the convention.
Yes.
That the so-called Republicans did to Ron Paul. I will never, ever, ever forget that. And so when Trump got in, I wish I could have seen every never Trumper Republican to their face and just said, now what? Now what? You're the one who really hates America. You're the one who really hated freedom. And look what you got. So, Mike, there's so much more. I'll call back. I hope you guys don't mind. I love you, man. And this was great, because this stuff, it builds up, and I don't call because I watch you a day behind because of the YouTube things.
Okay.
But I thank you, man. And I will call back, okay?
All right. Well, Mark, thank you very much for the
Mike.
phone call, and we're going to let you go now. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. So let's talk about immigration, because, as you know, these migrant caravans are now starting to show up on the Mexican side of the border with the United States. Some of these people have made it through. A lot of them have been arrested, but the vast majority are still on the Mexican side. The U.S. has now shut down completely the busiest border crossing between Mexico and California in anticipation of the arrival of the migrant horde. And they've closed the gates. They've closed the gates here. And apparently, unexpected development, the Mexicans are not happy with these Central American migrants. And part of the problem is that migrants are ransacking businesses. They're looting and pillaging and plundering as they go along. That's not going to make them any friends. And so there have now been protests by the Mexican people trying to kick the caravan migrants out of the city of Tijuana. And they wanted to evict the migrants from a shelter where approximately 2,000 Central Americans are staying. The Tijuana government set up the shelter as the city witnessed a reported buildup of federal and state police forces while the number of migrants continued to climb. So it is a huge, huge mess where everybody's fighting at everybody. And I think there's an object lesson there for the globalists who really thought they were going to take all these different groups of people and just pour them all together and everybody was going to get along just fine. Okay? Over in Sweden, a 25-year-old woman was gang raped by Africans in a playground in central Stockholm. The woman contacted the police, who then arrested the three men the same evening, who are aged 18, 20, and 29 years old. Two are citizens of Somalia, the third in Eritrea. Two of them were previously convicted for crimes like assaults and drug offenses. One of them is suspected of a rape that took place in February. By the way, after they were done raping this woman, they also stole her property. So, thank you, George Soros, and all those open borders people here. Apparently, over in Italy, people got an eyeful over there. A young Somali refugee who had just obtained protected status in Italy has been arrested for raping a 68-year-old woman who's apparently homeless. And apparently he attacked the victim while she was... the Somali refugee is homeless. He attacked the victim while she was sunbathing on a beach in Abruzzo in the east of Italy and just raped her right hard. And apparently people were wondering what was going on because before the actual rape, he was walking around the streets totally naked and jerking off in public. And they called the police, but he still had enough time to attack this woman. He just got his protected status. They passed this guy. They said, yes, we can have this guy in here. Back up in Sweden again, apartments are starting to put up barbed wire fences to keep out what are being termed as gangsters, which are these roaming gangs of migrants who are starting to engage in antisocial behavior, as it were. Now, the Green Party in Sweden has suggested confiscating the homes of citizens and giving them to migrants if the property is deemed by the Green Party to be too large, or if the owner has more than one residence. So we're already getting into this thing. We're going to start confiscating property and giving it away here. And somebody actually wrote an article saying that the U.S. ought to consider exactly the same thing, where somebody comes around, they look at your home and say, oh, you don't need that much room. We're going to move you to a smaller place, and we're going to give your house to this migrant family. And by the way, this generally doesn't work out all that well, because what's been going on is the migrants, when they are put into new housing, whether it's actual houses or special apartment units or whatever, they treat them about the same way as they treated their homes back home in their original countries, which is to say, not very well. And very quickly, the properties descend into squalor and decay and ruin. Now, again, the Swedish Green Party, there was a politician, Zeta Catalan, who believed in open borders, and he campaigned for open borders. And she was the former leader of the Young Greens of Sweden. And apparently, in March of 2017, Zeta Catalan was down in the Congo campaigning for open borders, and they grabbed her and beheaded her. So, not much gratitude down there. Okay. Over in France, there's a 19-year-old French teen was brutally murdered, was stabbed by again, a refugee, stabbed 23 times. And apparently the victim, Baptiste, was leaving the apartment of a friend when a stranger confronted him on the staircase over there being too much noise in the building. Now, Baptiste and his friend told the man they had nothing to do with it. It was coming from a different apartment. Then, without any warning, the stranger suddenly stabbed him 8 times in the throat and 15 times elsewhere. Now, his friend managed to intervene, but help came too late for the French teen. If you import the third world into your neighborhood, you import third world problems. Down in Australia, popular support for allowing an increase in Muslim immigration has collapsed. And apparently a lot of it had to do with this Islamic State-inspired terror attack in Melbourne. This happened at a place called Bourke Street by Somali immigrant Hassan Khalif Shah Ali. And so, yeah, it's backflashing. People want to go back to being French, to being Australian, to being British, to being German. They're getting really kind of sick and tired of all this, let's blend everybody together. Okay, now, the globalists, though, are still pushing their agenda. And over at Breitbart, they're reporting on apparently the latest push right now, the latest propaganda, the latest spin, is that mass deportation is morally unacceptable now. You can't deport these people. It's immoral. It's wrong. And therefore, the only solution right now is for a general amnesty for all refugees and illegal immigrants. Just wave the magic wand and make them citizens. That's the only moral way to move forward. And apparently, this is coming out of the Brookings Institute's William Galston, who's called populism the enemy of democracy. And in combination with neoconservative pundit Bill Kristol, They put together their New Center think tank, which is pushing this agenda: amnesty to all illegal aliens and ending the country caps in the U.S. legal immigration system. Basically, open borders. No more borders. That's what they're pushing for. And look how well it's working out now. And I know the globalists' heads are filled with all these idealistic visions and dreams, but it's not working out because of human nature. And human nature is human nature, and it can't be changed by any amount of outside tinkering, contrary to what liberals think. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Over in Great Britain, there is a lot of contention over Brexit, specifically the Brexit deal and whether they should even have a deal. And anger is building against Theresa May because her deal that she put together basically gives the EU everything that they want. It's a no Brexit, or a Brexit in name only. And the opposition politicians are saying this is not acceptable. So they're describing Theresa May as either completely useless or plotting to keep the UK in the EU. And Gerard Batten basically ridiculed the idea that May was allowed to head the withdrawal process, as she'd always been a hard-line Remainer. She doesn't satisfy either side. In fact, if there's one thing she can point to as an achievement, is that she managed to craft a Brexit deal that has ticked off the Brexiteers and the Remainers. That takes skill, talent, and daring here. She's facing a potential vote of no confidence, and more there's talk of there being a no-deal Brexit. The EU is now saying that they're going to put off the deadline, the drop-dead date for the deal, to something like 2030. Nigel Farage is out there saying, we have voted twice to leave the EU. Not leaving betrays trust. So apparently, as you know, Dominic Raab, who was the Brexit secretary, who quit last week over the EU withdrawal agreement, is being replaced by a gentleman from, let's see. Oh, my bad. I cut and paste a little too short here. Okay, so the Steve Barclay, who's very much in favor of leaving the EU, he's been confirmed as Britain's new Brexit secretary. And Theresa May is looking to replace cabinet members who've resigned over this Brexit deal. So it's a very, very heavy situation. Apparently, former Scottish Member of Parliament and Sputnik columnist Tommy Sheridan and Jim Sillars, the former deputy leader of the Scottish National Party, are out there saying the only reason we're in this mess is because of Theresa May. And there are calls for her resignation. Apparently, she's in serious trouble. She's being savaged by callers into radio shows over her Brexit deal on a radio phone, in which people are telling her to quit, make way for Jacob Rees-Mogg. They actually compared her to Hitler appeaser Neville Chamberlain. And yeah, I can see why they might see that, because from their point of view, the EU was trying to do to Great Britain the same thing the Nazis were. Basically, come on in and say, we're going to tell you how to run your country from here on out. And Neville Chamberlain went on and appeased Hitler, declared peace in our time, and of course that didn't work on out. Apparently, things are so up in the air that the British Army has been preparing plans to put troops on the streets to deal with potential chaos if there is, in fact, a no-deal Brexit. Now, top tactician Steve Baker is saying they've reached the threshold of 48 letters to force a vote of no confidence. So we'll see if that's going to happen this week or not. France, meanwhile, is stamping their feet and issuing threats, basically saying accept May's Brexit deal or face economic disaster. France's finance minister attacks absurd British politicians trying to scupper the PM's plans for the EU exit. Could we be looking at a new war between Britain and France? It just sometimes feels like we're getting that crazy. All righty. Now, apparently, the member of parliament who heads the Labor Friends of Israel, Joan Ryan, is concerned that if Theresa May is forced to step down, Jeremy Corbyn might become prime minister. So the dust isn't even settled, and already the members of parliament are out there saying, how does this affect Israel? How will this affect Israel? We have to think about Israel before we think about anything else. Just angering stuff. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break. When we come on back, more from the world of political correctness, science, health issues, all kinds of stuff like that. So stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're just getting a breaking story, apparently over in Chicago at Mercy Hospital and Medical Center, which is on Michigan Avenue. Apparently there was a shooting incident, multiple people wounded, including the shooter themselves, and no other details about what may have prompted this. Maybe the shooter took too many of those prescription antidepressants. But we'll keep an eye on that story. Meanwhile, we have a caller waiting on the line. Robert in Northern California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Well, I had this Cortez lady on my mind until you just mentioned that last piece of breaking news. May I ask where you got that from?
It's just showing up now on, well, like the Chicago Tribune's website. I think CNN is carrying it live. I don't know because I'm over on Fox, but somebody emailed me and said, hey, this just hit.
Oh, well, gratitude to them. That's a good thing they did. I haven't checked CNN lately. They're just not really worth my time. Well, the main reason why I called in, sir, was this Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yes.
And she went on a 15-plus minute rant last night, doing the word soup, talking about the three branches of the Congress.
Yeah.
You heard this, right?
I've heard that, yes.
Yeah, I still can't believe that this woman got elected. Can you explain to me exactly how we got to this point here in America? Because I thought that we had a lot of really moral and intellectually sound beings in this country, and I'm getting confused.
It's amazing how many people in that Congress are ignorant of the way the government is supposed to work and the law. It's apparently not required to have the job. Just being able to get up and convince people to vote you into office or being able to steal elections is the only requirement to be a member of Congress.
Well, I do understand that if you were to want to run for the presidency of the United States, one of the legal requirements is to have a law degree. Is there any kind of educational degree that's required for people to just go to the House or the Senate?
I do not think that there actually is a legal requirement for candidates for president to have a law degree.
Maybe that's something we should be working on.
Well,
one of the only ways we're going to save our country is if we can really focus on the proper changes to make before we run out of time, because these Democrats aren't playing fair, and they're playing fast and hard, and they're really sucking up on the stupidity of the common American. And this is a scary time for our country.
It's very, very scary because, the leftists are clearly attempting to, if necessary, by force, basically have a soft coup d'etat in this country, so that liberalism will reign forever and conservatives will go away. But this Ocasio-Cortez, apparently she's out there saying now that she thinks it's going to be okay for incumbent Democrats to be challenged in 2020. And she's starting to say some really radical stuff. She was campaigning all this during the midterms on the current Democratic leadership and how terrible they were and they all needed to go. Now she's in Washington, D.C., and she's all buddy-buddy with them, and they're all friends and just getting along wonderfully. It's typical politics here.
Well, another scary thing about her is that she's been caught calling for the removal of all whites from power and all kinds of really strange, unscripted things. And I'm just really worried about the future of our country, because I've really been a conservative, patriotic, much like your wife, Christian American. And I'm not knocking where you're coming from, because I've had both sides of the objective. I started out life as an agnostic, so I get it, and I'm not going to give any judgment. But you know, when I look at it, when I just look at the moral value that represents what our country was founded on, I think that if we lose our morality as a populace, I think there's a very good chance that we're going to end up losing our entire country.
I agree.
And I was just wondering if you thought that there was a way that we could get out of it. What can we do as Rivero's Rangers out here on our own to try to start gathering some kind of momentum towards a positive end? If there's anything we can do, I really appreciate it. Any time during your show that you come up with a good idea like that you put it out our direction. A lot of us out here not only listen to you, but we're willing to sit down there in front of the keyboard and try to figure out what we can do about it and who we can spread it to and what it might mean. And a lot of us are relying on you, because everything is getting so confusing at this point. It's hard to keep up on the news. It's like I said at the beginning of the call, where did you get that information? Because I'm looking all over the news all day today. It's my day off, and I didn't see it until you mentioned it. Now I found it.
Yeah.
Now I found it. But, without your lead, I would have been blind.
Well, as far as the future of the United States of America, I think we're past the point where this country can be repaired. I think it's
You really do think we're past the Rubicon?
Yeah, I do think we're headed for a Soviet Union style collapse, or worse, we're going to get into a world war that we are going to lose. And right now, the most.
So what can we do? What can we do as Americans with moral value to try to exist and live through this, so we can preserve those morals?
Basically, get on out there and connect with other Americans who believe in having strong moral values, and just start learning how to re-network with them. One of the ways in which the liberals really got going was this whole community organizing thing, where they're pulling together people who think exactly the same way that they do, and they just start agitating. And, conservatives tend not to do that. We tend to sort of be stay-at-home people, work at our jobs, because, we have jobs. We have things that we have to do, which puts us at a disadvantage to a lot of liberals who are basically just, coasting along. So, but right now, spreading education is the most important thing that we can do. And just explain to people, we know the government is lying to us. We know the corporate media is lying to us, and that there's some kind of a big challenge that's coming, whether it's going to be an economic crash or whether it's going to be the collapse of the U.S. government from all the infighting, or we actually do get into a war and lose. People need to be really thinking about getting through to the other side, first of all, and second of all.
Well, on that note, may I be so bold as to offer a piece of advice on that exact note, if I may? Well, in addition to the idea that I believe what you're saying is correct, that we should share as much information as we can with our neighbors and our friends, I think another thing that we need to do, if we're really actually past the Rubicon at this point, is start preparing with the real basics of like food and water and just, preparatory goods to make sure that we can get out the other side of this with some numbers enough to keep some moral value in our country. If it's that bad, I think we need to start kind of just getting past the shock and start dealing with the situation in its severity. One of the best things we can do is really just prepare ourselves and our homes and our families, and we need to really just assess our social assets around us. You know, our friends and neighbors most nearby us may be the people who save our lives.
Absolutely.
Comes to a very uncomfortable situation.
We have to bring back the neighborhood. You know, and we're starting to see indications. People are starting to turn away from social media and go back to just being human beings. And yes, your friends and neighbors that you live near, that's going to be the mutual support structure to get through the hard time. And the important thing is to convince them that, yeah, there are going to be some tough times coming here. And you can live in denial if you want. And certainly the government and corporate media want you to think everything's going to be just fine. But look at just how many people are being caught off guard just by the severity of this winter, and they weren't prepared for it. And the same thing is going to be true.
Well, if you fail to prepare, Mike, if you fail to prepare, you're preparing to fail.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay?
Hey, you have a great day. I wish you the blessings that I can, and you and your wife, you know, I pray for you guys, although it means a lot more to her than you. Don't worry, you're getting the benefits of it.
I appreciate it.
You know, I really wish you guys the best.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right,
you
thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Going to switch over to Mark in Montana. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Michael. No, I'm getting really concerned. I turned 51 this year, and
you young
I've never
whippersnapper.
Oh yeah. I still work in the oil field, Michael. Don't call me young. These guys I work with are young, and they're working me in circles these days. I'm really concerned about what I'm seeing in this country. I probably have never mentioned it before. My mother was a Jew, and so I kind of have some of those stories and stuff from the European Jews and the older members of the family that used to tell the stories and all that. By the way, I'm a Christian, so you don't have to hate me anymore. But I'm looking at the similarities that are going on in this country. I mean, we've had a digital book burning in the form of the purges on Facebook.
Yes.
We've had the brown shirts in the streets in the form of Antifa.
Yes.
Out rioting, looting, and killing, and busting windows. Like I said, the digital book burnings. We've had the demonization of a class of people, which are basically the normal, what I call the normal white heterosexual people in this country, the people that don't care, that just want to lead their lives. We've had demonization of minorities, specifically Christian minorities in areas. I mean, we have the same occurrences happening here that happened in early 1930s Germany. It's very scary, and the thing is, these patterns happen in every country that tries to transition into socialism. It happened in the Soviet Union. They had their book burnings. They had their purges. The Chinese had their book burnings and the purges. The Vietnamese, anybody that wore glasses were. And the Khmer and the Cambodians, anybody that wore glasses were brought out and killed because it represented being intelligent. And these people on the left are supporting these same policies. I look at socialized medicine, and I think there's a reason that they push for socialized medicine, because the Soviet Union was so effective at using this free, medication or free medicine for all to label its political enemies as mentally ill and in need of re-education. And we have something right now called oppositional defiance disorder that's in the new DSM book. And that's exactly what it is. If you agree with the government, you're crazy. So I'm very concerned, Michael. I'm very concerned. I think the best that we can do is keep our bodies and minds in shape. Keep a little. I live, 1,800 miles away from where I work, but I'm prepared to go there if I need to get there. So whatever you think you need to do that. But whether that's bullets and beans and whatever else you feel you need to get there, you probably need to keep that stuff around. And I'm not saying to go out and start a war, but that's what the left is pushing. They are pushing war. They're pushing revolution, and it's something that I don't think that they're foolish enough to believe that they could win.
Well, apparently, whoever's organizing them thinks that they can accomplish something. I don't know about a complete takeover of the country. I mean, I think what they're really aiming at is a grand slam dunk in 2020. Democrats overwhelmingly in control of Congress, a Democratic president, and they're just going to push that liberal agenda, grab all the guns, and so forth and so on. And yes, they could start a revolution doing that. One of the things that really worries
the
me,
only reason that... Go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things that really worries me is how disconnected some of these political operatives and politicians themselves are from what's going on with ordinary Americans. And I think it's leading them to make some serious misjudgments. We know that liberals are absolutely convinced that they're changing how we think by just what they put in front of us. But again, that was the big fraud coming out of Margaret Mead. You know, human nature is as much inheritance as experience, and it's not that easy to change.
And you know, the only reason that socialism survives for a limited period of time is that it's instituted on the backs of capitalism. If it wasn't instituted and set up on the backs of a previous capitalist society, the resources wouldn't be there for it to survive. And it survives for a while because of those resources that are gleaned of the previous capitalist society. But they can't go on forever because they continue to produce nothing.
Yeah, you know, socialism works until you run out of other people's money.
Right, and the infrastructure was built, and the means of production were built under a capitalist society. The socialists, or the National Socialists in the form of the German Workers' Party or the American National Socialist Democratic Party, are trying to build themselves now upon the previous advances that a free market has created. And if they can push it and they get their way, it will last for a while because the means of production were built under the free society. Those means will slowly disappear with no way of replacing them under socialism.
Well, it almost sounds like the situation we've got right now, where our manufacturing has been in decline for all these decades. And, you know, there's already a lot of socialism embedded into our system and our structure. So it's not like somebody's going to throw a switch. I don't even see us as a capitalist country anymore. I mean, it may be still operating as capitalism up at the very, very top, but down toward the middle class, it's more fascism, and certainly down toward the poorer people, it's definitely gone socialist with all the, you know, the food stamp programs and everything like that.
I see it as a bureaucratic capitalist society. We're a capitalist society that is controlled by a heavy, I don't want to say heavy-handed, it is a heavy-handed bureaucracy. So it treads lightly like it's walking on eggshells. And that's disturbing in and of itself also. You looked at what the Nazis did in Germany. They didn't go in and take over, you know, the Volkswagen plant. What they did is they told the Volkswagen plant, you will produce this and you will produce this at a profit. If the guy at the head of the Volkswagen plant couldn't do it, they'd drag him out in the street and replace him. That's what it was. That's the way National Socialism works.
Mark, I'm going to have to let you go. Mark, I'm sorry. We've hit a commercial break. I need to let you go. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're going to take one more phone call. Then we're going to close the lines because I got more news to go through here. So Joe in Oklahoma. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
A couple callers back, there's a gentleman who was talking about the president needs to have a Juris Doctorate, and all legislators ought to have Juris Doctorates, but no disrespect to him, but I wish that he and others would search out the original 13th Amendment. There's a fellow by the name of Brian Marks.
Yes.
Did a very great dissertation on that, and I myself viewed this original 13th Amendment in Arlington County Courthouse, Arlington, Virginia, about 20 years ago or so. I don't know if the volume's still there, but it was the statutes of Virginia and laws of the United States in 1817. And the 13th Amendment then isn't the 13th Amendment now.
Yep.
And what it did is prohibited anyone with a title of nobility, and Esquire is a title of nobility, which most attorneys and lawyers carry. Their shingle behind their desk says Esquire. They are a noble. They were prohibited from holding public office. I wish that he would go look at some of that, and we need to reinstitute civics. The American people have taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker. If you voted Republican, you helped lead to this demise. Not that Democrat would have been any better, because think about the Patriot Act came in under Bush. Kavanaugh, he's a great Second Amendment supporter, but he helped get the Fourth. And the list goes on and Obamacare, everybody blames Obama for Obamacare, but it was Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, both Republicans, that put it out on the floor for a vote. And we had a Republican majority in both houses, and guess what? It was the Republicans that sold us down the tubes. We already know the Democrats are going to, but the Republicans are the sheep in wolves' clothing. If you vote for Democrat or Republican, you're voting for your own demise. And yes, I agree with you. There isn't any saving it. You just as well hunker down and get ready for the worst, because the horses are, the whole herd's already left the corral. And with that said, I thank you for your time.
All right. Well, Joe, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here, and we are going to close the phone lines. And the gray area here, though, is that the original 13th Amendment, and Joe is correct, there was an amendment, number 13, which kind of mysteriously disappeared, and they hoped that nobody would notice. And it was the Titles of Nobility Amendment, and its original intent was that nobody could run for office in the United States of America if they carried an inherited title from one of the European ruling families, because one of the lessons coming out of history was just how convoluted things got when you had all these princes and lords who were intermarrying across borders and bringing along their titles with them. And it got to be very complicated. Now, whether the idea that judges and lawyers are called Esquire really qualifies as a title of nobility, that has been up in the air quite a bit. So that's where it gets a little bit gray. But that 13th Amendment went away, and in its place we got the one about involuntary servitude. We'll be right back after these station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. We're going to leave the phone lines closed for a little bit because I got a bunch of stories to get through. Meanwhile, checking back in with Chicago, still no idea about why this all went down, but apparently they're now saying 4 people were shot, 2 are dead, including the suspected shooter. And this started basically about 3 p.m. Chicago time. And very chaotic situation, but they don't know. Let's see. Witness, a man shot a woman 3 times in the chest outside the entrance. That may be domestic situations here. Anyway. All right, so let's get on back to political correctness and so forth and so on. Here's a story, makes me very angry. And apparently down in Florida, why is it always Florida that's doing all this weird stuff? There's a Florida high school, they're under fire because the administrators permitted the screening of a graphic Planned Parenthood video about consent. And the video was produced by Planned Parenthood, presented by the Safe Place and Rape Crisis Center, and it was shown to students in Sarasota County high schools in order to teach them what consent means. The reason parents are upset is the video features several same-sex couples engaging in kissing and sexual touching, and features graphic discussions about sex. Now, the video is pushing the idea that asking for consent doesn't have to be awkward. In fact, if you do it right, it could actually be kind of sexy. But apparently, complaints over the graphic video piled up very, very quickly. Now, remember Celine Dion? Singer, celebrity? Apparently, she has now transitioned into the world of fashion design, and she's got this gender-neutral clothing line called Celine Nunu, which is created in conjunction with the global fashion brand Nunu. And basically, she's got this commercial that came on out where she's walking down this maternity ward, and on one side are all the little blue cribs, and on this side are all the pink little cribs, and Celine waves her wand and everything just gets turned to gray, pushing this whole idea of gender neutral or genderless, and basically saying the message is, we have to shape children for the future, and that means giving them the freedom to decide for themselves what their gender is. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. Your gender is determined in your DNA. And we've seen all the transgendered people, and they've had all the hormone treatments, had surgery, they're wearing the right clothes, they've got the right mannerisms. You do a DNA test on them, they're still the original gender. You can't undo that. You just can't. Over in Hollywood, Hollywood feminists are joining forces in the fight to take the sting out of abortion, and they're promoting what's called, it's a Shout Your Abortion book. And this is coming from Sarah Silverman, and Daily Show co-creator Liz Winstead promoted the event on their Twitter pages, which actually took place last Friday. Comedians Daniel Radford and Daniel Perez were also there, along with actress Amy Brennan. And what they're trying to do is make this deadly practice great again. And so they've put out this book that includes photos, essays, and creative work from women who want to share how positively they carried on after their abortions. So they're pushing that really, really hard. And as I've said, I have a lot of mixed feelings about abortion. I concede there are circumstances when it is necessary. You're dealing with rape, you're dealing with incest, you're dealing with serious birth abnormalities, you're dealing with a risk to the life of the mother. Yeah. The part that I do have a problem with is this dehumanization of the fetus in order to turn abortion into an after-the-fact birth control. That I have a problem with here. Over in Eastern Michigan University, the Women's Resource Center will no longer host the vagina monologues because the play lacks diversity and inclusion, because not all women have vaginas. That really is, I think, the shark right there. Over in, okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are rejoining our network here. Over in Virginia, at the Mary Baldwin University, they had an art exhibit which included some pieces that made reference to the Confederate history. And the art exhibit was shut down because the students were out there crying, racism, racism, racism. And the artist came forward and said, why don't we get a chance to explain what we're trying to do here? The intention behind the work is not racist. We're not racist. This is about history. And they raise a very good point. We see all this stuff about tear down this banner, tear down this statue, tear down this artwork. We only ever hear the side of the people who are complaining and screaming. We never hear the other side of why that is up there, what it is supposed to represent here. Oh, this is a good one. Student Senate tries to impeach student body VP for saying illegal alien on their personal Facebook page. That's getting just a little too intrusive. Again, freedom of speech. Gotta have freedom of speech. Now, up in Portland, this last weekend, they had a rally that was called the Him Too Rally. And apparently, journalist and photographer Andy Ngo reports that he and others were physically assaulted by Antifa protests while the police just stand around and did nothing. And as a matter of fact, there is a video that captures this lady with like really shiny pink hair and just outlandishly colored clothing, just yelling at and spitting at the men, and finally going on up and just striking one who fights back and knocks her to the ground because she's small and he's big. And she gets up and starts whining and screaming about, how could you hit me? How could you hit me? You hit him. But you're not allowed to hit back. That's in the rule book I just made up. But apparently it was getting very, very rough. And again, Antifa out of control, the brown shirts, although in this case I think it was a pink shirt. And again, the police not doing anything about it here. Okay, getting into, well, this is an interesting story. Over in Great Britain, the telecoms watchdog Ofcom has fined Virgin Media and EE £13 million for overcharging users for terminating their contracts early. Now, you know, when you get involved with any of these companies, you have a contract. And if you want to leave your contract early, there is a fee. Apparently, Virgin Media and EE were overcharging. And they got caught doing it. And now, of course, they're being fined for it. So look at the way this works. The customers of these companies got overcharged. The companies got sued. The money goes to the government. Just think about that a little bit here. Out in California, they're finally getting a break. The winds have died down on the California fires. They're actually starting to get some rain as well. PG&E is acknowledging their culpability in the starting of the fire, so they're going to be looking at all kinds of lawsuits. Right now, the official death toll is 63. More than 1,000 are still missing. And this long after the fact, I think that when it's all done, and it's going to take a long, long time to search through all this burned out forest, I think we're going to see a lot more people who died. I can imagine that if Southern California, well, California in general, is anything like here in Hawaii, a lot of homeless people were living in those forests. And they may have gotten caught. So we'll see. As a matter of fact, California has brought in war zone DNA experts to identify the victims because of the condition the bodies have been left in by the fire. Oh. And a lot of people are still talking, well, those celebrities, they deserve to lose their home. No, nobody deserved to lose their homes. Anthony Hopkins' house was just absolutely left untouched. His neighbor's house just went up. Fires can be like that. They can hop hither and yon, and, you know, of course, it depends on what Anthony Hopkins' house was made out of. It may have been built to be fireproof. Remember when they had that big hurricane down in Florida, and there was that one house right on the beach that had been built to withstand 600-mile-an-hour winds, and it was still in perfect condition. If you're willing to spend the money to make your house fireproof, or hurricane proof or earthquake proof, it will be so. Now, last week we were talking about how Pierce Brosnan was very upset because he'd had to abandon his mansion, beachside, with his wife, and then later on he showed up at a press conference to very tearfully ask for financial help for everybody who lost their homes. Well, good news for him. It turns out his home, like Anthony Hopkins, was spared. Little bit of damage, little bit of scorching, going to be easy to fix, and so good for Pierce and his wife that they did not lose their home and everything in it. That's one of the things that really hurts about a fire. And because I've been through a house fire myself, and we were lucky. We got it put out before the fire department even showed up. But sometimes these wildfires can hit so fast, you don't have time to grab anything. You know, your important papers, your memorabilia, your heirlooms. Basically, you got time to grab yourself, your family, your pets, the car keys, and you're gone. So maybe that's something you ought to take into account for your prepper kit, is having a folder in it with copies of various legal documents that you need to have, like your Social Security card, your passport, things like that you're going to have. Okay, now here's a good question. This came on out from the Economic Collapse blog. It's saying, if America is such a happy place, why is the suicide rate up 34% since the year 2000? And it's a legitimate question, and it's a legitimate number, because I went on out and I checked. And yeah, a lot more people are committing suicide here in the United States than they did 18 years ago. Economic pressure is obviously one part of it. Too many antidepressants could be another aspect. So, meanwhile, Donald Trump has signed a bill into law approving the creation of the standalone Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. And basically, the CISA Act reorganizes and rebrands the National Protection and Programs Directorate, or the NPPD. This was a program operating inside the Department of Homeland Security. As CISA, they're on their own. They don't have to answer to the Department of Homeland Security any longer. Now, the NPPD was established all the way back in 2007. It's been around for 11 years. And it's been handling almost all of the Department of Homeland Security's cyber-related issues and projects, and may I editorialize and say, not with much success, because cybercrime is just completely out of control. And this agency is in charge of overseeing civilian and federal cybersecurity programs. I mean, cybercrime is just completely out of control. Now, security researchers have revealed that Apple still has not fixed the iPhone X bug that could let hackers steal deleted photos and files. And they're saying they found the bug. They're white hat hackers, and they won a $50,000 bounty for finding the flaw. Apple's been notified about the vulnerability, but according to Forbes, they haven't done anything about it. And by the way, again, when you have a device like a smartphone or a tablet and you walk out of your home, you're immediately vulnerable. And so you should be very careful and selective about what you have on these devices. Now, Claire and I both have iPhones. We don't have our banking information on there. We don't have credit card information on there. Mostly it's about text messages, browsing the web, making phone calls, FaceTime, things like that. And that's coming out of experience, because remember in the heyday of the contactless credit cards that had the little radio chip inside, Claire got hit. I think it was about 5 Christmases ago. Somebody walking through the mall had put together one of these machines that was simply pinging every radio chip credit card. Those are now thankfully gone, and they've been replaced with a card that you insert into a machine that puts contacts on it. Great one. Somebody just sent me a comment, and they said, could you explain to me why I'm supposed to accept transgender people for who they are when they themselves could not do so? It's a valid point. All right. Apple and Samsung have been fined for deliberately slowing down the older phones. Now, Apple and Samsung are still insisting that this was done to maximize battery life. But most people are thinking that this is just another way of trying to get people to move on to the newer, faster phones, more expensive phones, which, of course, when the iPhone 11 comes on out, the iPhone 10s will start to slow down. And it's kind of hard not to know what's really going on. There have been accusations that the manufacturers of operating systems for desktop computers deliberately start to cripple them when the new version comes on out. You know, Windows Millennium Edition, which was never great to begin with. Boy, did it start to show major problems just before XP came out. That kind of thing. Alrighty, article coming on out from Investment Watch blog, basically saying when you Google something and the first thing you are shown is Snopes, it may lend credibility to the very conspiracy Snopes is trying to disprove. Now remember, Snopes has been identified as a gatekeeper. They are not the good guys. They enforce the government's and corporate view of everything that's out on the web. And they've had a lot of problems here. So anyway, apparently Twitter users are now calling out what's called blackfishing. And this is where you have white influencers who claim they are posing as biracial women to get more followers. See, the corporate social media is out there trying to make sure that conservatives are being silenced. They're not looking for the other phonies. They're not looking for the phonies that are out there. They're just trying to gain followers to push their liberal agenda. Anyway, we're coming up now on a commercial break, and when we come on back, more about the world of computers, arts, science, and so forth. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And from California, they're now saying 77 confirmed dead, more than 1,000 still missing. Touching base back on Chicago, that last comment I made turned out to be correct. This was a domestic dispute, and apparently the shooter shot this doctor. Apparently they had been engaged, and the doctor broke the engagement off. And apparently all this red flagging stuff, that doesn't work either. Okay, getting on back to social media and computers. Apparently, as far as Twitter is concerned, saying that men aren't women now qualifies as hateful conduct on Twitter. Megan Murphy, editor of Canada's leading feminist news portal, Feminist Current, was recently informed by Twitter that 2 of her tweets had violated the platform's rules against hateful conduct. One of the offending tweets stated that men aren't women, and the other asked, how are trans women not men? Men aren't women. I'm sorry. Again, check the DNA. Now, over at Facebook, there's a big stink brewing, and Facebook may be in kind of trouble. Their stock has now been in decline for something like 3 months, and a lot of it has to do with people just, really responding to all that open censorship. It's going to be a long, long time to counter that. But apparently, when Facebook was dealing with all of this criticism, they hired a public relations firm to discredit critics by claiming that anybody criticizing Facebook were agents of George Soros. Now, this was reported in the New York Times. Facebook is out there saying, this is nonsense. And obviously, Facebook is no longer a popular company. There have been all these privacy and data leaking scandals, half-hearted apologies, and an ongoing obvious effort to clamp down on independent news media have kept Facebook and its CEO Mark Zuckerberg in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. So apparently, investors are now calling on Zuckerberg to step down as chairman because this idea that they hired a PR firm to smear their critics, that's not looking good either. So last Friday, Facebook's chief operating officer, Sheryl Sandberg, pledged a thorough review of its use of this conservative consulting firm. So, all right. And in the category of heck hath no fury like a liberal scorn, the media appears to be turning on Facebook and Google. And I think the realization now is corporate media understands Facebook and Google are now their competitors. They're fighting for the same audience. And they may have been all buddy-buddy and working together back in 2016 when they were out to get that gosh darn Donald Trump. But big media has discovered that their big tech sweethearts betrayed their affection and trust. They're just another bunch of predatory, profit-maximizing monopolies. So that'll be good to see the corporate media and corporate social media have at each other. That will be fun. Polls are now showing that Americans are turning on social media, or actually turning off social media. The majority now think it hurts democracy. Now, last year, 43% of U.S. adults thought social media hurt society. That increased to 57% this year. Both Democrats and Republicans have soured on social media, as Republicans have claimed censorship of conservative voices, which we certainly know that was true. And Democrats have complained about the use of targeted ads that they say can be used to discriminate against minorities. Boy, they're just not making anybody happy. Now, here's an interesting little story. And I may have mentioned this last Friday, but I don't remember, and so I'm going to repeat it. Basically, this is down in Texas. There was a man who was facing 99 years because his former girlfriend claimed that he attacked her and slashed an X in her chest. And fortunately, he is not going to jail because his mother found this selfie that was date stamped showing that the accused man was some 65 miles away from the girlfriend at the time the attack supposedly happened. She cut the X on herself. She wanted to destroy his life, destroy his career. Okay. Here's another article, and I'm certainly in agreement with this one. This is from libertycrier.com. 80% of Americans think political correctness is a problem. And, of course, the far left is out there. They still think PC is great. PC is their God. Bow down to almighty PC. But the vast majority of Americans think it's a problem. And they're tired of the liberal whiners using it as an excuse to try and control everybody's life around them. By the way, what do you have when you have a bunch of liberals down in the basement? A wine cellar. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, again, back up in Portland, we had this little clash between Antifa and the hashtag #HimToo people. And what we're starting to see here is a lot of people are concerned by all of this very open, seemingly socially acceptable bias against white heterosexual males. And they want to stand up and say, hey, we're not the problem here. We're not the oppressors. We're being scapegoated. So apparently up in Portland, somebody was posting flyers that said it's okay to be white. That's all it said. And the liberals are up in arms saying that this is anti-Semitic, it's a sign of white supremacy, and they're just completely triggered and off their nut here. Okay, once again, we seem to have an issue where the schools that are supposed to be teaching our young people about the American culture seem to be going the other way. Indoctrination. And once again, we have a school dress code that basically resulted in a trial. And U.S. District Judge Lynn Adelman in Schoenecker versus Koopman decided last Friday that the school could not enforce message dress codes. That if somebody wanted to wear a t-shirt that depicts or mentions guns, that's protected speech. And apparently the school's argument was it's just a picture, it doesn't convey a specific unambiguous message. And the judge didn't go for that. So, all right, we're talking about gun control. We're talking about this new bill, House Resolution 7115. And apparently they're still writing it because we're hearing the descriptions of what it's supposed to do keep changing. Now, the bill was originally said it was going to be about 3D printed guns. Apparently, those have now been added into this. And they're also putting in a backdoor to force people to register older and homemade firearms. Now, way back when I was a black powder enthusiast, one of the great things about black powder guns was you didn't have to register them. Simply because if you were shooting a patched ball, there wasn't a ballistics test in the world that could match a patched ball back to the barrel that fired it. And besides, when was the last time you saw somebody hold up a 7-Eleven with a flintlock pistol? So, but I remember even back then, where the ATF were coming into the store where I bought my supplies, and they were demanding customer lists. And the manager of the store just standing firm and saying, no, you're not allowed to have these. This is private information. So they want the guns. They want your guns. Their guns are okay. They think their guns are really good. All right, let's talk about some science stuff here. Billionaire Yuri Milner, he's Russian-Israeli, he's planning the first private mission to deep space. And NASA is helping him. Now, Milner is curious whether there's life on Saturn's moon Enceladus, which many experts believe is the most likely place in the universe to contain alien life. It's certainly possible. I'd rather be looking in those methane pools on Titan, but we'll see. But apparently, Milner's nonprofit Breakthrough Starshot Foundation and NASA are agreeing they're going to put this mission together. This billionaire is going to pay for it. NASA will do it. Good for this guy. I love it when billionaires do good things with their billions, as opposed to George Soros, who's just messing around with everybody's life here. Meanwhile, Voyager 2 is creeping closer to the edge of the solar system. Voyager 1's already out past it. It's past an area known as the heliopause, where the solar wind from the sun, basically it becomes undetectably small. And at that point, by definition, you are truly in international space. So that's kind of an eerie moment, because I remember when the Voyagers were launched, I remember watching them being built. So that's, yeah. And apparently Voyager 2 is still sending data. Takes a licking and keeps on ticking here. Now, the United States plans to continue using Russian-built RD-180 rocket engines for its Atlas launch vehicles. This is coming from NASA Associate Administrator for Space Operations, William Gerstmeyer. And he's saying they're staying with the RD-180 and Atlas. Now, the Space Launch System, the new big rocket, will have the main engines that were being built for the Space Shuttle, but for the Atlas III and the Atlas V, they're going to have to keep using the RD-180s. Congress imposed a ban on those engines in 2014 as relations with Russia deteriorated, but were forced to cancel it a year later when it became clear the United States is unable to develop its own rocket engines in the coming years. All the jigs are gone. The people who are experts in this stuff have probably been lured to other countries. And I understand that there were some startup companies trying to build rocket engines. They didn't really do very well. Now, Morton Thiokol can make the solid boosters, but we're talking here about liquid-fueled engines, which can be very, very tricky. Meanwhile, even though the Warhawks are making stink face at Russia, at least the space scientists are getting together. And Roscosmos is interested in the U.S. proposal of creating an international lunar orbiter, literally a smaller version of the ISS in orbit around the moon. And basically, they're seeing it as a transition point for other missions going out into the solar system. And the ISS, of course, has a limited lifespan. They have not figured out a way to make these things last a really long time. They're constantly being ground down by micrometeors. In fact, some of the surfaces on the ISS are now so roughened by the micrometeors, it actually can slice the cloth protective covering of their gloves. Hasn't penetrated the gloves, didn't lose any air, but it can be a little unnerving when you're done with your mission. You go back inside and the tips of the cloth glove, the protective outer glove, are shredded up here. But Russia's talking about, hey, let's do this one together. And Russia might be in a good position to help us because Russia has developed a spacecraft capable of delivering 3.5 tons of cargo into orbit. And they're basically saying this is about ready to go. They've had a press conference. A Soyuz 2.1 carrier rocket is planned to be used to deliver the spacecraft into orbit. That's a lot of weight. That is a lot of cargo. But at some point, somebody's got to crack the puzzle of how do we get cargo of that weight into low Earth orbit much less expensively, because that's actually the big part of the cost of any space project, just getting it out of the Earth's atmosphere up into orbit. So I have to look on that, my copious amounts of free time here. Russia is sending a humanoid robot that will be going to the International Space Station. The project is called Tester, and it's an autonomous robot that will perform work inside the manned spacecraft inside the Russian segment of the ISS. Now, the first copy of the robot will fly aboard a Soyuz spacecraft, and the second one will follow soon after. So apparently this robot, the Teledroid, is designed for work on the Russian station's, the space station's Russian segment. And I remember seeing a video a while back that Russia wanted to build a robot that would basically crawl along the struts, the truss structure, and would have an upper humanoid body that was tools and arms and cameras and sensors, but it was basically just crawling along the truss to get where it needed to go. Kepler has been put to sleep. We knew this was coming. It was out of fuel. NASA has sent the final shutdown command. They call it the Goodnight Command. And what it is an order to shut down the command receiver so that Kepler will not pick up anybody's signals in the future and accidentally misinterpret them and send out other signals. It's basically a precaution to make sure that once a satellite or spacecraft is shut off, it stays shut off, that there are no surprises down the road. Now, here, next one is going to be really, really weird. Okay? Over in Great Britain, this is being reported on 12160, Piers Morgan, who's this presenter on Good Morning Britain, was basically talking to this animal rights campaigner, Wendy Turner Webster, who said that guide dogs for the blind should be abolished because they don't consent to work. And of course, Piers Morgan just was stunned. And so, Wendy said that there are welfare issues within guide dogs. She says a quarter of them do not become guide dogs, and they have to go to rehoming systems. That's true. Many years ago, I helped raise puppies for the Seeing Eye program. We would have a puppy for a year, then we'd take it on down, get a new puppy. And not all of them make it through the training. But basically, Piers Morgan came back to her and said, how do you train your dog? And Wendy says, well, yeah, she had to train her dog for her safety. And Piers said, how did you get your dog's consent to teach it how to sit, to obey your human orders? Do you ride horses? Did you get your horse's consent to have you charging along on top of it? And of course, Wendy started getting defensive. She looked flustered. She said she is responsible with her animals, so it is a completely different situation. In other words, okay for her, but not for other people. And Piers came on back and said, so because you're responsible, it's fine for you not to have to get consent. And then Wendy kind of lost it and said, you're mixing up the issue. You're saying it's about consent. And Piers said, you're the one who was saying it was about consent. It's amazing here. All right, let's get back to the Vatican. This actually happened a little while ago, but I kind of want to finally get this taken care of. The Vatican has ordered the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops to delay voting on measures to hold bishops accountable for failing to protect children from sexual abuse. Now, in his announcement, Cardinal Daniel DiNardo said he was disappointed by the Vatican's decision. Now, what appears to be going on, well, first of all, the survivors are saying this is absolutely unacceptable because this has been going on for so long. And finally, the church is trying to do something about it and establish some policies. But what appears to be going on here, according to this story in Government Slaves, the Pope is getting ready to resign in February of next year. Now, in September of this year, Pope Francis convened all the Episcopal conferences worldwide for a general meeting to discuss the prevention of abuse of minors and vulnerable adults. And it seems like the reason this order went on out to delay the vote is that Pope Francis wants to impose his own view on the problem before leaving office without having any further interference from the U.S. Catholic bishops. I think there's a major problem out there with that. Now, Spain has announced that they're going to outlaw alternative medicines. And the two examples they gave were acupuncture and homeopathy. And the Spanish government has declared war on alternative medicine, saying it will eliminate from health centers what it considers a health risk. In other words, this is a war to protect the profits of the giant pharmaceutical corporations. That's what's going on. Now, here's another story, and this is kind of weird. Apparently on November 1st, the body of Alex Azar, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Daniel Best, who was the advisor to Alex Azar, Secretary of Health and Human Services, was found in the garage door exit of an apartment building. This was the guy who was working with Trump to try and bring pharmaceutical prices down. And he was found unresponsive, but pronounced dead on the scene. Apparently, back on the 15th, The D.C. office of the chief medical examiner declared the death a suicide, saying Best succumbed to multiple blunt force injuries and provided no further details. This was reported on Cleveland.com. So apparently this guy, who was the enemy of the pharmaceutical industry, beat himself to death, is what we're being told on this one. And here is another good one that you're going to love here. James Salas of Montrose, Colorado, was diagnosed with Langerhans cell histiocytosis back in 2012. Now, LCH is a rare form of cancer in which an excess of immature white blood cells cause tumors to form throughout the body. Salas was placed on chemotherapy and painkillers for 5 years. His primary doctor quit his case in 2017. Salas found another doctor who examined him and said he had never had cancer. Salas was actually suffering from vasculitis, an inflammation of the blood vessels. Now, the chemotherapy he was on has given him pancreatitis that he will have to live with for the rest of his life. And so Spain wants to basically say, well, you know, we're going to get rid of people taking care of themselves. You will go to the doctors. Remember that Johns Hopkins study? The third leading cause of death in the United States of America is medical mistakes. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with our last segment of our show after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today. And getting on back to what's been going on in France, remember when I said there's probably a lot of issues, it's more than just the gas. And it turns out that, yeah, one of the other issues they're writing about, apparently France has gone way down the road with speed cameras as a means of generating revenue. And the French are not happy about that either. And again, you reach a point where a population begins to understand they're being pillaged and plundered by their own government. And they're not going to be very happy with that one. Okay, over in Washington, D.C., Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or as she's being called over on BitChute, Alexandria Occasional Cortex, is calling for a socialist overthrow of establishment Democrats. Boy, do they have a problem on their hands. She wants to take apart the existing Democratic core because they're not socialistic enough for her. Apparently, over on the Senate Intelligence Committee, they're calling for Google and YouTube to do more censorship under the guise of protecting this country from those evil Russians. Ooh, bad Russians, bad Russians. Okay, there is a story that's coming out of, again, Florida, Fort Lauderdale. There is apparently at Cardinal Gibbons High School in Fort Lauderdale, children are coming down sick, multiple sick students, after exposure to what is simply being described as an unknown substance. So hopefully it's just a hysterical reaction here. More comments here about the stock market, and they're saying that they're blaming today's drop on Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and tech shares. They're all in trouble. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, Facebook is now in its third solid month of stock price declines. And they did it to themselves with all of this open censorship. So, already apparently down in Florida again, somebody is saying that Brenda Snipes' resignation justifies having a revote. Let's just do it again. I think the American people need to get really upset about this. We have been down this road before. We keep seeing it over and over and over again. Obvious signs of massive election fraud. And we need to start voicing our anger about that. You want something you want to get angry about? Honest elections. And how can anybody come back and say, no, I'm opposed to honest elections? we've got the moral high ground here. Now, it's possible to have honest elections, or at least more honest elections. Our current system is a joke. It is intentionally set up to facilitate and conceal massive election fraud. We know that illegals were voting this last time. We know that these electronic voting machines had cellular modems. They could be hacked into over the cellular system. This is no way to run an honest election. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everyone that you know. Talk to people face to face. Bring back the art of conversation. And again, keep reminding everybody how corporate social media is practicing censorship. Anyway, we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.